And hello everybody and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast this week. It's quite a big one this week. We got a lot of really big news items to talk about. And I'm really glad that I get to do this podcast this week because holy crap. So, first of all, thank you guys for joining me on the podcast. Obviously, if you've never listened before, hello, welcome to the podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about all the latest breaking movie news that has come out throughout the week, all the big noteworthy news items, that is, and I wrap them up right here nice and tight in one little podcast for you guys. We also talk about the movie trailers that came out this week. We'll also talk about the movies that are coming out in theaters for all your viewing pleasures, and a few things along the way as well. Other things along the way as well. Obviously, there's things along the way because this is a movie news podcast. But yeah, so that is what this podcast is all about. Obviously, I was out of town last weekend. I went to Las Vegas for my mother's birthday weekend. Had a great time over there. We came back earlier this week. I've been a little, there's a time change. The time change kind of messed me up the first day I came back. So the Facebook page has been kind of quiet. You notice the Facebook page has been kind of quiet for a while, but I have been updating it as I'm coming back. So if I missed anything this week, please, just know that I got in late one on the beginning of the week, and I've been trying to catch up on some other stuff along the way. Of course, trying to keep up with the movie news and stuff like that. So it's just been a little bit of chaotic week for me this week so far. So, but everything's cleared up, and I'm gonna do the podcast for you guys. So let's get right to it. We're gonna start off with trailer talk this week, and we have at least three trailers we're gonna talk about. There have been other trailers that came out this week. I will put those, of course, as always, I always put the links to the trailers down below in the description/show notes area for you guys to go check those out. But we're just gonna talk about 3 trailers this week. There are more trailers down below, again, if you want to go check those out. But we're just going to talk about 3. The first one we're going to talk about is Early Man. It is a stop-motion film and is set at the dawn of time when dinosaurs and woolly mammoths roam the earth. The movie tells the story of one plucky caveman who unites his tribe against the mighty enemy and saves the day. That is the official synopsis, so I'm not ruining the movie for you. But it looks pretty cool. I believe it is the same company that does the Wallace and Gromit stop-motion movies. At least that's kind of how it feels, kind of the look and everything of the stop motion, and it looks pretty good. The voice cast is pretty impressive. You got Eddie Redmayne, you got Tom Hiddleston, you have Maisie Williams, and you have Timothy Spall in there. They're the lead cast, voice cast members for that movie. It looks really good. Stop motion. I know stop motion isn't for everybody, and the idea of the movie is actually pretty cool. So you have these cave people, these cavemen. This tribe, and it looks like they're hunting for food, and all of a sudden this kind of king comes along, and he says the Bronze Age is upon you guys. So it's a very kind of almost fish out of water kind of thing. There's a nice little joke in there about sliced bread, and sliced bread being the best thing since ever. So that would saying that is the first slice of bread joke in the world, but it doesn't look too bad, honestly. It doesn't look all that bad. So Early Man, if you want to go check out that trailer, or if you've already seen the trailer, go watch it again, I guess. Early Man comes out on February 16th of next year, so we'll definitely talk about that more once we get closer to the release date. The next movie trailer we're going to talk about is Game Night. Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema are responsible for this. It is an action comedy that stars Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams as a couple whose weekly game night quickly gets out of hand when Bateman's brother, played by Kyle Chandler in the movie, turns it into a murder mystery that actually becomes a kidnapping because Kyle Chandler's character gets kidnapped. I have to say, I was really surprised by this trailer. I knew about the movie. I knew that who was involved and when they started officially filming, but I didn't know how well it would turn out. At least from the trailer, it looks really funny, and McAdams and Bateman have this kind of really great chemistry in the trailer, and the twist. The twist is, I think, is what is going to make this movie kind of stand out for a lot of people. It definitely has me intrigued. It's a simple kind of fun little game night, and all of a sudden it turns into a real kidnapping. So it's a nice little twist on it. The trailer kind of does, at least at the beginning, kind of really takes itself a little seriously, and then you start seeing all the comedic hijinks going on. You see Bateman's character accidentally get shot by Rachel McAdams' character. Rachel McAdams essentially sees someone die in front of her, and she's like, yes, and she's like, oh no, he's really dead. I thought that was great, and the little banter they had before that little incident was also great too. So I like everyone involved. I like Bateman, I like Rachel McAdams, I like Kyle Chandler, the rest of the cast. You got Jesse Plemons in there, you got Danny Houston in there, you have Michael C. Hall in the movie, although you don't see him in the trailer. At least I didn't see him in the trailer. But you got a bunch of other people in there as well. It doesn't look that bad, to be honest. I was very surprised by the trailer, and I'm definitely going to go watch this. So game night will open on March 2nd of 2018, so that's next year. We'll also obviously talk about that when it comes out. And the final trailer we're going to talk about this week is The Post. This is the new Steven Spielberg movie that follows the country's first female newspaper publisher of the Washington Post, Kay Graham, played by Meryl Streep, and its horror-driven editor Ben Bradley, played by Tom Hanks, as they fight to publish the Pentagon Papers, which prove the government has systematically lied about the scope of the Vietnam War. The film has a very, very star-studded cast, and Hanks and Streep. They also will have Sarah Paulson, Carrie Coon, Alison Brie, Michael Strahlberg, Bob Odenkirk, Jesse Plemons, David Cross, Zach Woods, Tracy Letts, Bruce Greenwood, and Bradley Whitford. This thing is jam-packed to the gills with talent. And you got Steven Spielberg at the helm directing the movie based off this true event that is very timely when you think about it. So it looks good. The trailer is great. It really shows off a lot of Streep and Hanks's performances. It kind of does follow more Streep than Hanks. I think Streep will probably be one of, if not the prime focus of the movie. That's what it sounds like, and even from the synopsis, that's what it sounds like. So I think she will probably be the prime focus of this movie. I don't know too much. I know about the Pentagon Papers and this whole ordeal of what happened, when the Washington Post decided to publish it, and then there was this, these threats from the government telling them not to post it because they would be, so there was a specific wording that I wanted to use. I think they used it in the trailer, but I can't remember what it was. But it was a very big event, and it's very timely to what is going on today. So I'm really looking forward to this. This was a movie that kind of came together really at the last minute, and everything they have so far looks fantastic. Again, this is a movie that it's very timely, but again, the trailer itself is phenomenal, and it's coming right around Oscar season, so you can probably expect this movie to be in a lot of headlines and be at the forefront of a lot of press as it comes out. So the Post will come out later this year in a limited release on December 25th, Christmas Day, but we'll get a wide release on January 12th of next year. That's kind of how it's done a lot of times. For those of you guys who don't know what's going on, why it's getting a limited release and then a wide release. Usually around that time, the end of the year, there's a lot of movies that are prime Oscar movies like The Post that get these limited releases on certain days before they become wide releases the following year in just the first 2, sometimes 3 weeks of January. That's just how it works, and they do that to build a lot of steam and credit. They did it with Patriots Day earlier this year. They did it with American Assassin last year. It's just something they do, and just to get the Oscar buzz going. And then once enough people hear the Oscar buzz, they probably hopefully go watch the movies. That's what's going on. So that's The Post. There are a lot more trailers that came out this week. Just don't have a lot to say about them down, so you can go check those out down below. Actually, since I can apparently look at my outline, there's actually one more trailer to talk about. Good old fun. Anyway, there is a new trailer for the Christian Bale-led Hostiles. The movie is it's pretty much a Western movie, and it stars Christian Bale as a legendary army captain in 1892. And he reluctantly agrees to escort a Cheyenne war chief played by Wes Studi in the movie and his family back to the tribal lands. Along the way, they encounter a young widow played by Rosamund Pike, whose family was murdered on the plains, and together they all must join forces to overcome the punishing landscape and hostile attacks from another tribe. This is directed by Scott Cooper, who has directed films like Out of the Furnace and Black Mass, as well as Crazy Heart. So the movie looks, just based off the trailer, it looks really good. It looks like it's a movie that's going to be probably tough to watch for the most part, but it does look rather good. The cinematography is fantastic. I don't know who does cinematography in the movie, but it looks pretty good. The cast is also really great. You got Christian Bale, you got Wes Studi in there, you got Rosamund Pike in there, Adam Beach, Jesse Plemons, Paul Anderson, Bill Camp, and Stephen Lang are also in the movie, of course, amongst some others as well. But those are kind of the big ones that I think most people will probably know. But yeah, they're all in there, and it looks great. I mean, you see a little bit of the past of Christian Bale's character, and you can hear his reluctancy. Throughout the whole kind of trailer, is very reluctant. There's this great scene that's intercut throughout the movie, and it's a dialogue that's also intercut throughout not the movie, the trailer, between him and Ben Foster in the movie. I don't think Ben Foster's going to be in the movie long, based just how the trailer works out. Trailers are very deceptive, but just alone based off the trailer, you just have this great just back and forth between the two, and there's this great line by Jesse Plemons when he's talking to someone else, and someone just tells him that basically you just kind of become a monster out here, and he says that's what I'm afraid of. So it looks like it looks like a great movie. Hopefully it is. I have enjoyed a lot of Scott Cooper's movie. I mean, he's only done really 3 movies. I haven't seen Crazy Heart. I have seen Out of the Furnace and Black Mass. And while the movies do have some issues here and there, like pacing wise and stuff like that, it is a lot of the time just the characters that bring a lot of the emotion and carry a lot of the weight. So hopefully that is the case for this. So it's Hostiles. The movie will be released on a limited release on December 22nd, and it will get a wide release next year sometime in January. They haven't actually picked a date out yet, but I can assume if they're saying January, it's probably going to be within the first 3 weeks of it, because that's usually how it works. So there you go. That is the last trailer. For trailer talk this week, let's move on to this week's news items. And usually, if you listen to this podcast enough, you know that I like to build up to the big movie news items of the week. And that is what I will do later on. But there is one particular news item that came out, and I can't remember if it came out over the weekend or if it came out on Monday. But again, I was all messed up because I was out of town. But I wanted to mention this first, and I think this would have been, either way, this would have opened up the podcast this week anyway. There was a report that came out that Disney was potentially eyeing to buy 21st Century Fox.
Say what?
Now, Disney is, of course, no stranger to buying big studios. They bought Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm not too long ago, and that's turned out pretty well for all the parties involved. However, according to CNBC, 21st Century Fox has been holding talks to sell most of its company to Disney, which would have included the feature film and television divisions. Now, the report from CNBC noted that the two companies are talking, or at least were talking, and they've been having on and off again negotiations between there was on and off negotiations between the two sides for a while now. And it was suggested that the leak of the news was to get the conversation moving along. Now, talks are currently off. It was reported a couple days ago that the talks are currently off at the moment. But there has been on and off talks again from the CNBC's previous report. And even though the talks are off, I'm still going to talk about it, because obviously this was a big news item that is noteworthy to talk about, even if it didn't happen. So apparently the management of 21st Century Fox was under the belief that if they can't compete with the media scale of other studios, that Disney has the scale necessary to take its film and television productions to new heights. So they were falling a little behind. But Fox wouldn't necessarily be selling all of the company. They intended on keeping the news and sports divisions, which probably would have been a really good idea. Now, what would have that meant for us, the fans? Movie-wise, Disney would have, and on the nerdy side of all this, Disney wouldn't have now, or would have owned the rights to all the other Marvel properties, like Fantastic Four and X-Men and all the X-Men spin-offs like Deadpool, X-Force, and the New Mutants. Not only that, they would have owned the original Star Wars trilogy, because apparently Fox owned the original Star Wars trilogy and not Lucasfilm. So they would, Disney, if they had, of course, gotten the 21st Century Fox movie division, they would have gotten to make new Blu-rays and DVDs of the original trilogy. That's at least movie-wise. TV-wise, they also would have gotten the other Marvel properties like Legion and The Gifted and the animated Deadpool series that's in the works over at FX. Now, again, this is all the nerdy properties. All the other properties, though, that would have included in Fox's 21st Century division were Aliens, Planet of the Apes, and Avatar. So that all would have been Disney-owned as well. Now, as a whole, this is a massive, and would have been a massive undertaking. And Disney would have probably been the biggest power. Probably not. Probably is not the right word. It would have been the biggest powerhouse in Hollywood and the world. Also, that is one less major studio in Hollywood for Disney to compete against. Financially, it would have been a really great move for both sides. But should it have happened, and it's not happening at the moment, but should have it happened, it would have been a different story altogether. Now again, this is a nerdy place, so we're going to talk about the nerdy side of it. The idea of having Fantastic Four and the X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is awesome. It is fucking mind-blowing. But what would this mean, and what it would have meant? I'm mixing my words now. But what would it have meant for Deadpool and X-Force? Would Disney continue the trend of making those movies rated R? Because one of the things that made Deadpool so successful is the fact that it was rated R. I mean, yes, the character is finally getting his own solo movie, but it was the fact that Fox wasn't afraid to go to the rated R limit. Logan was rated R. If those movie properties were done by Disney, there was no way and no chance in hell that those movies would have been rated R. We probably wouldn't even gotten a Deadpool movie if Deadpool was under the ownership of Disney. Now, Disney would have owned those rights. Would they continue the trend and make those movies rated R, or would they go their mold and make them PG-13, which would have hindered the character of Deadpool a lot, let's be honest. Now, Kevin Feige, who of course the Marvel Studios president, has always been asked questions about doing a rated R movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And while he's always been very coy about answering the question, or he's always kind of sidetracked it, so I was like, yeah, maybe, probably. Feige, earlier this year, said he doesn't think it's, quote, out of the question, end quote. So if the deal would have gone through, we probably would have had to wait and see what Kevin Feige, or even what the new Disney CEO would have done. Because Bob Iger, who is the current Disney CEO, is leaving the CEO position, I think by the end of the year or something like that. So he's on his way out. So what would that mean for Disney and for Marvel and for everything else? Now, honestly, the nerd in me would have loved to see this deal kind of happen, only for the sake of the Marvel characters finally all being within the same cinematic universe. However, the other part of me, the part of me that sees this as a rather huge move, would have had major implications for the movie landscape. That could have been either, again, depending on if you want to see this as a nerdy thing, good, or as a business side of a thing, kind of maybe bad. Not bad in the sense that, Disney just owns everything now. I mean, you can probably make that argument, but bad in the sense that there will be no kind of real diversity anymore. Yes, movie properties can go to the other big studios like Warner Brothers or Universal or Paramount, but Disney would still be the big game in town. there's been a lot of people that have been talking about this. People taking the middle ground and seeing the two sides of it, like I kind of was right now. There have been people that have been against this. There are people that have been for this. But everyone kind of agrees that if Disney had bought 20th Century Fox and bought their movie and their television division, this would have been a major, major shift in everything. Is it a good idea for Disney to own all these? Look at it. Disney already owns, movie-wise, they own Lucasfilm, they own Marvel, they own Pixar. On the TV side of things, they own all these networks. They own ESPN, they own ABC, and so on and so on. So this would have been a major, major thing for them to accomplish. But on the other hand, would it be a very good idea? Because then we're losing some I'm not saying middle ground, but we're losing a lot of creative freedom for other people to do certain things. So I don't know. I fall in the middle ground of everything. I see what everyone's talking about, how this will be a dramatic shift in the landscape of Hollywood. And on the other side, the other part of me, the nerdy part of me, would be like, finally, all the X-Men characters are together, or all the Marvel characters are together. But at the same time, it's like, yeah. So I'm very split in this, but I'm leaning more toward the let 20th Century Fox do their own thing for the moment. But let them give up the Fantastic Four rights to Marvel because they need them more than Fox does. Just one little jab in there. Just one. All right, so that was the big movie news item of the week. That would have been the big movie news item of the week if there was no other real big movie news items that came out this week. But that is not the case. So we're gonna build up to the other big news item of the week right now. So let's move on to the next movie news item, which is Derek Connolly is set to write the Metal Gear Solid movie. Sony Pictures, who we will talk about much more later on in this podcast, has brought in a new writer to write the latest draft of the movie adaptation of the video game series Metal Gear Solid. Derek Connolly, who co-wrote Jurassic World and the upcoming sequel, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and most recently wrote Kong Skull Island, has been hired to write the latest draft. The movie will be directed by Kong Skull Island director Jordan Vogt Roberts, who of course has worked Derek Connolly on Kong Skull Island. So the series, for those of you guys who don't know, was created by Hideo Kojima and follows the character of Snake, a soldier who infiltrates a nuclear weapons facility to neutralize the terrorist threat from Foxhound, a renegade special forces unit. That was at least the first game. The series has gone through a lot of changes, since it first came out in 1998, so just be aware that is not the whole series that's been going on. There's been a lot of changes, a lot. But the movie has been in the works for a long time. Vogt Roberts joined the adaptation back in 2014. That was way before he started directing Kong Skull Island. So that was supposed to be his first project. Then then Kong Skull Island came along. He's like, I'm gonna go do that. So that was the case. So this is a huge step forward for the Metal Gear Solid movie in terms of finally getting it off the ground. They have a director. Now they have a new writer. Everything's still in the early stages, so we don't know where everything is going to go at this point. But this is, again, a huge step in the right direction for them. I think Derek Connolly is a solid writer to bring, no pun intended, to bring Metal Gear Solid to the big screen. So we'll see what happens. All right, so let's move on to the next movie news item, which is Lauren Cohan has joined the action thriller film Mile 22. So the Walking Dead actress has joined the movie. It will be directed by Peter Berg, and it already has a pretty impressive cast. You got Mark Wahlberg in there. You got Iko Uwais in there. He was from the Raid movies, if you haven't seen any of those. You have Ronda Rousey, and you have John Malkovich. Now, the story follows an elite American intelligence officer who, aided by a top-secret tactical command unit, tries to smuggle a mysterious police officer with sensitive information out of the country to a getaway plane on an airport 22 miles away. Hence, Mile 22. XTX Films is releasing the movie and hopes the movie will turn into a franchise and already start development on a TV series and a few VR projects. The movie has been kicking around Hollywood for a few years now, and there's been a lot of eyes on this project, obviously being kicked around for so long. No word yet on who anybody will play, although a lot of people are saying that Mark Wahlberg and Iko Uwais will be playing the two characters. I think Mark Wahlberg is eyed to be the intelligence officer, while Iko Uwais is the leader of the command unit. I think that's what was the early word of what was going on. There's no word yet on who anyone really is playing, and there's no word on who Cohan will play. And Cohan has been stretching out since she started appearing on The Walking Dead. She was in a horror film last year in The Boy, which was okay, wasn't all that great. The TV series, The Mindy Project, she was in most recently in the Tupac biopic All Eyes on Me, and of course she was Martha Wayne in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Mile 22, we'll probably be hearing a little bit more about this project because they're going to start filming later this month. So I think they're starting to round out the cast, so we'll definitely probably be hearing a lot more about this. All right, so let's move on to some, again, being slightly a nerdy kind of podcast, we're going to talk about some comic book movies. We're going to talk about Shazam. It finally has its Billy Batson. Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema is finally moving forward with their Shazam movie. Obviously, we know that it will be directed by David F. Sandberg, who directed Lights Out and Annabelle Creation, and recently cast Zachary Levi to play the adult superhero alter ego of the young boy Billy Batson in Shazam. For those unfamiliar, by the way, if you keep seeing and hearing me, well, not you can't see me. If you can't see me, that's very, very weird. But for those unfamiliar, Shazam follows a young boy named Billy Batson who magically gets the ability to transform into an adult superhero by simply yelling one simple word. Can you guess it? Because I've been saying it a lot. Shazam. So like I mentioned, Zachary Levi will play the adult Billy Batson, aka Shazam, but now we have the young boy Billy Batson. The cast has found their Billy Batson in Disney Channel star Asher Angel. Angel is currently on a Disney Channel show called Andy Mack, where he plays the character of Jonah Beck. He's relatively new in Hollywood. I looked him up, and it sounds really weird when I say that, but I looked him up, and apparently Andy Mack has been his biggest project up to date so far, but that obviously is no longer the case, as Shazam will be the biggest role that he has done so far. The cast has been slowly getting together for a while. We mentioned last week that Mark Strong from Kingsman and Sherlock Holmes and a bunch of other projects. If you don't know who Mark Strong is by now, I worry about you, especially if you listen to this podcast long enough. But Mark Strong, he is in talks to play the villain of the movie. Also, we didn't talk about this on the podcast, but it was up on the Facebook page. Grace Fulton from Annabelle Creation, which would be a nice little reunion for her and Sandberg. She's also in talks to play one of Billy Batson's friends in the film. So you have that. Henry Gayden, who wrote Earth to Echo, and Darren Lemenke, who wrote films like Jack the Giant Slayer, Turbo, and Goosebumps, have written the script, and production aims to start early next year. Shazam currently does not have a release date, but if they do start filming next year, we can probably assume that there will be a 2019 release date in our future. That I can only assume that will be the case. So let's move on to some of the bigger news items of the week. We will be sticking with the DCU for these next two news items. Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam may be introduced in Suicide Squad 2. Now, if you know what I'm talking about, then yes, this is kind of an interesting idea. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has been signed on to play this character of Black Adam, which in the comics is the arch nemesis to Shazam, which we talked about earlier. And he's been signed on to play Black Adam for a while now, and so he will not only appear in his own solo Black Adam movie, which was announced earlier this year. He will not appear in the solo Shazam movie, which a lot of people assumed that he would, but he will appear in another DCU movie, Suicide Squad 2. Now, according to The Wrap, Warner Brothers is eyeing to introduce the character of Black Adam in the sequel. The outlet says that two separate project insiders have confirmed that the current plan for the sequel is to, quote, for the members of the Suicide Squad to be tasked with tracking down a weapon of mass destruction. That weapon, Black Adam himself. End quote. So they also brought up Johnson's past comments to Fandango, where he said that Black Adam is going to be introduced in a really cool surprise. And this would probably be one of those real big surprises if it is indeed the case. Now, the outlet also says that Johnson's busy schedule won't be an issue, as he won't need much time to shoot for his part. Now, this could either mean that Johnson probably won't be in the movie that long, but this could also help up Suicide Squad in the box office, considering that Johnson is one of the biggest draws in Hollywood. Not only that, Suicide Squad wasn't met with a lot of fanfare. At least a ton of fanfare. Also, having Suicide Squad face off against two overpowered magical beings back to back would probably be just a little tiny bit too much for that franchise, considering it is one of the more smaller scale franchises. So maybe the idea would be that Black Adam would show up in the last 5 minutes and then he would just like disappear. He would be one of those villains that just pops up and then disappears, like, you'll never catch me. Although he'd probably never say that, but who knows? Well, who knows? So Kevin O'Connor is attached to write and potentially direct the sequel. Kevin O'Connor, by the way, director behind Warrior and The Accountant with Ben Affleck that came out last year. Production does aim to start next year in the fall, and the sequel is expected to bring back most of the cast. That will be led by Margot Robbie and Will Smith, of course reprising their roles as Harley Quinn and Deadshot. Suicide Squad 2 does not currently have a release date, but again, if they start filming next year, maybe a 2019, maybe 2020 release date is in our future. The idea, though, of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson appearing in Suicide Squad 2, that is kind of interesting. I don't want him facing off against the Suicide Squad. I think the idea would be better for him to kind of just pop up and be something that they accidentally release into the world, and he's just maybe like a post-credit scene where he just pops his hand out and he comes up and he's like, again, being very cheesy, I'm free, and he just flies off somewhere. We don't know where he ends up. So I think that would probably be a better idea, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. Again, sticking with the DCEU and Warner Brothers CEO mandated a 2-hour runtime for Justice League. Now, Justice League is upon us. It comes out next week, and I know many people were excited for that. But many were surprised when it was announced last week that the upcoming DCEU movie and the superhero team-up of Justice League was under 2 hours long. While the surprise ranged from shock to upset to even hatred, saying, "How dare you?" it looked like the move was made by a surprising source. According to the Wall Street Journal, the runtime under 2 hours was made by Warner Brothers CEO Kevin Tsujihara, and not director Zack Snyder. Now, the move came from the CEO not wanting a bloated runtime like Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which ran 151 minutes, aka 2 hours and 51 minutes. At least the theater cut ran 2 hours and 51 minutes. Now, granted, this was, of course, the first time that Batman and Superman were on the big screen together, so it took a while, and then when they finally came together, it kind of just ended really, really weird. Why did you say that name? Anyway, the piece went on to confirm that the studio made the Justice League movie more hopeful. They confirmed that when director Zack Snyder turned in his cut earlier this year, it felt that he had, quote, made progress with the lighter elements, end quote, but also felt the movie could use more work. That is when they brought in Joss Whedon to do some rewrites and new scenes to shoot, and as we all know, Zack Snyder had to leave the production after the death of his daughter, and that's when Warner Brothers made Whedon step in to direct those reshoots and those new scenes. Now, the Wall Street Journal does confirm that the reshoots were significant and bought the budget up to $300 million. That means Justice League is going to have to kill it at the box office to at least come even. They go on to say that post-production was spent trying to meld the tones of Snyder and Whedon's work to make a seamless movie. And while the earlier cuts didn't do that, the later cuts did. And not only that, the audience scores for Justice League on those later cuts were close to what Wonder Woman was scoring, which, let's face it, is saying a lot, considering that Wonder Woman is one of the most respected superhero movies in a while, and also the most respected and, dare I say, best DCU movies so far. Now, finally, they mentioned that the studio is happy with the finished product and think that Ezra Miller, who is playing the Flash in the movie, will be the breakout of Justice League. And they also say that the solo Flash movie is a priority, even though they don't have a script or director yet. So we'll just have to wait and see what they do with that. When it comes to the runtime, though, we'll see if it's worth it. Justice League, again, comes out next week. I've always been the proponent that a runtime doesn't define a movie. If a movie needs to be long, then it needs to be long. If a movie needs to be short, then it needs to be short. Some movies can benefit from having a little bit, more of a longer runtime. So a lot of movies can benefit from being a little bit shorter, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. But I digress. But Justice League, when I heard about that it was under 2 hours, I didn't mind. I didn't care, I guess is the right word to use. I didn't really care that it was under 2 hours. I just, it's a movie. Come on, settle down. I know you've been waiting for this movie, and I know it's a movie that a lot of people have been waiting for, and I've been waiting for this movie as well. But at the same time, I'm not jumping at the gills and jumping, in front of moving cars to be like, go watch Justice League. No, it's, just settle down. I am very slightly optimistic for the movie, but not holding my breath. I do have my tickets. I bought the tickets already. I'm not gonna watch it on Thursday. I'm gonna watch it on Saturday. I hope it's good. I do, and I've said this on the podcast before when I've went on my very long rants of the DCEU. Justice League has to be good. It does. It can't be okay. It can't be decent. It has to be good. It has to be good, or it has to be great, because the DCEU needs this. And there's been a lot of talk about the DCEU. There's been a lot of talk about what the future of the DCEU holds. Is it going to be one big connected universe? Is it not going to be one big connected universe anymore? The Flashpoint movie apparently is now the new Flash movie is now dependent on the Justice League being good. If the Justice League is not good, then I don't know what Warner Bros. Is going to do with the Flash movie. I don't know if they're going to move forward with Flashpoint. I don't know if they're going to change their mind again. I don't know when they'll hire a director for that movie. A lot is riding on Justice League, not just for the fans, but for the DCU and the studio as a whole. Justice League is a big movie in terms of, yes, character, but it's a big movie in terms of where do fans finally stand with the DCU, and where does the studio finally stand with the DCU. So, obviously, we'll talk about Justice League more next week, so just hold off on that. Alright, so let's move on to another interconnected universe. We're moving away from DC and Warner Brothers, and we're moving over to Universal Pictures. Because Alex Kurtzman and Chris Morgan have left Universal Pictures' Dark Universe. So maybe the Mummy did kill the Dark Universe. So reports say that Alex Kurtzman and Chris Morgan have departed Universal Pictures' Dark Universe franchise, leaving the interconnected series of films without their pretty much they were overseeing it, pretty much the people that were running it, to say the least. So Kurtzman and Morgan were hired to oversee the development of this new franchise back in 2014, even making a writer's room that consisted of them, John Spaths, who wrote films like Prometheus, Doctor Strange, Passengers, and Eric Hessier, who recently wrote Arrival last year, to get films like The Mummy, The Invisible Man, and Van Helsing off the ground. And Kurtzman himself took it upon, himself, to write and direct The Mummy. Not only that, apparently according to these reports, a brand new office building was revamped specifically to be the new offices used for the Dark Universe. They even apparently had a monster-themed decorations all around the building, which is now empty. That's so sad. So what happens now? Well, according to the outlet, Universal is now considering their options, which include possibly offering the IP to, quote, high-profile filmmakers or producers to make one-off movies that aren't part of an interconnected universe. So basically doing away with the Dark Universe, interconnected, shared universe idea. And one name being thrown around is Jason Blum from Blumhouse Productions. Now, Universal has a great working relationship with them. They've released pretty much all of the Blumhouse movies, like the Purge movies, the the Get Out recently. They released that and a bunch of other stuff as well. So they have a great working relationship with Blumhouse, and they have a great working relationship with Jason Blum. Now, all this news now puts Bride of Frankenstein, which Universal actually recently pulled the plug on pre-production, sending everyone home, in question, because that was supposed to be the next movie in the Dark Universe. The film already had Bill Condon, who directed the live-action Beauty and the Beast movie last year, or this year? This year? I think it's this year. I didn't watch it, so I'm kind of confused on when it came out. I think it was this year. Anyway, Bill Condon was set to direct. And he sounded, the last time people talked to him, very optimistic that the project was still going to happen. Angelina Jolie was apparently in talks to join to play the Bride of Frankenstein, and Javier Bardem had already signed on before that to appear as Frankenstein himself. So this is a move that a lot of people saw coming. Especially considering that The Mummy was not well received at the box office by fans or critics. It did well internationally, but Tom Cruise movies usually do well internationally as well, or pretty much all the time. But here in the States, it wasn't the smash hit that the studio really wanted it to be. There were also people, especially at the very beginning, not happy with the fact that Universal was going to take an action-adventure approach instead of the horror-thriller approach, which all these old movies used to do. You know, the old Wolfman movies, the old Dracula movies, the old Mummy movies, they were all pretty much kind of these horror-thriller movies, and Universal wanted to take some horror-thriller aspects, but include them in an action-adventure genre. So that is the case. But with this whole, I was a very big proponent. I was very on board with the idea of Universal bringing these characters back to the big screen. I am a huge fan of those old black and white movies of Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, all those, Wolfman, all those old black and white Universal movies. I am a huge fan of those movies. And when I first heard that they were going to do a shared universe with all these characters and bring it back to the big screen in modern times, I was stupid excited about this idea because, again, I was a huge fan of those movies. I loved the idea that they were going to do this. I thought it was really cool. I thought Universal was going to do it. I liked what Chris Morgan was doing at the time. Alex Kurtzman was always, hit or miss, but I guess at the time I think he was a hit because I was really excited that he was involved in it as well. I was really on board with this, and I liked what they were going to do, and I liked what they were going to do at first and with the characters they were bringing in. And then, I saw The Mummy, and I was like, oh, well, okay. Okay, I guess we can do that, sure. But The Mummy wasn't all that great. It was, it just wasn't good. But I was like, you know what? One movie should not define what the Dark Universe is. I'm going to wait for the next movie, which is going to be Bride of Frankenstein. Bill Condon and the writers were like, we're gonna make this great movie. We're gonna take our time with it. We're gonna make these characters great. We're gonna make a great, not just a great kind of horror thriller tension filled movie, but we're gonna make a great character movie. And that was great. They're saying all the right things about it. And then Universal pulled the plug. They sent everyone home. They were like, go home. We're gonna work stuff out. And I was like, oh, that's probably not a good sign. So. Again, I was really excited for this. I guess we're still under the impression of wait and see to see what happens with the Dark Universe. But for the meantime, Dark Universe at the moment is currently in limbo, very much in limbo. We don't know what's going to happen, and they really are gone. Alex Kurtzman is now focusing fully on the CBS All Access TV series Star Trek Discovery, and Morgan is going back to work on the Fast and the Furious franchise, especially right now, focusing on the Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham spin-off movie of Hobbs and Shaw. That's not what the movie's called, but that's what their characters are called, so that's what I'm calling the spin-off. So now Universal could very well end up bringing in someone else to overlook the universe, but again, in the meantime, the Dark Universe seems to be in the dark. It seems to be gone at the moment, and I'm a little bummed out about it. But if they do go the route of bringing in, high, as they put it, high-profile directors and producers for one-offs, and I think Jason Blum would be a tremendous choice for that. He's a fan of pretty much everything. Really, he's kind of one of the ultimate nerds running a film production company. So if anyone can redo the monster universe, the dark universe, Jason Blum will be that guy. So maybe, hopefully, they can work something out with him and Blumhouse Productions and do, even if it's just one-offs, even if they're not connected anymore, that's fine. As long as they bring these characters back to the big screen, I'm perfectly okay with that. And this was, oh man, this I can't believe they're gonna do this. So Kevin Spacey will be replaced by Christopher Plummer in All the Money in the World because they were shooting his scenes. But the biggest kicker of this movie news item, besides that, because that is a pretty big kicker, Sony Pictures still intends on releasing the movie in late December. So this is a pretty surprising and big and bold and ambitious move. In the wake of all the Kevin Spacey, alleged sexual harassment scandals, because there's scandals now, there's been a bunch of scandals now, Sony Pictures, director Ridley Scott, and the producers of the project have decided to remove Kevin Spacey from the already finished film, All the Money in the World, and plan to start reshoots and replace Spacey with Christopher Plummer to play J. Paul Getty. But again, the big news here is that they intend on releasing the film this year on its December 22nd release date. So, for those of you guys who don't know, by the way, if you don't know what the movie is about, All the Money in the World is the true story of the famous kidnapping of the 16-year-old John Paul Getty III. He was the grandson of the oil tycoon J. Paul Getty, one of the richest men in the world, who refused to pay the ransom. That's what the movie's about. So if you hear me say, Getty, like I just mentioned, like J. Paul Getty, you're like, who are you talking about? That's who I'm talking about. So the choice was apparently unanimous, and Plummer will now reshoot the scenes, which luckily for the character, he's by himself a lot, apparently. He's by himself in a lot of different locations. He does share some scenes with Mark Wahlberg and Michelle Williams' characters, who of course played real people. They're in the movie. Luckily for them, Wahlberg and Williams will be a part of the reshoots with the scenes that included their characters, so that's good for them. So when Spacey played the character, he only filmed his scenes in 2 weeks. And according to the reports, if anyone can reshoot those scenes and get them in an already completed film, it's Ridley Scott. In addition to that, considering that the role of Getty was all over the world, apparently some special effects will be needed and will help them out in the reshoots. They didn't really specify what they were going to do. They don't know if they're going to take Plummer's face and put it over Spacey's, or they're going to put Plummer, in front of a green screen or blue screen or something like that, or some mastery trickery camera work. We don't know what's going to happen, but that will be special effects will be used in some shape or form around that. Funny enough, Plummer was actually Ridley Scott's first choice to play the role, but the studio wanted a bigger name, so they got Kevin Spacey. So there you go. The decision, by the way, if you're thinking it's like, oh, well, yeah, Kevin Spacey now is alleged, is a alleged sexual, assaulter. The decision was not to redo all these scenes, to reshoot these scenes, was not easy. Apparently, Deadline, who broke the story, by the way, Deadline found out that the producers went back and forth all weekend, but didn't decide until earlier this week that they didn't want Spacey's allegations to ruin the movie, especially considering that Ridley Scott had dropped everything to direct this movie, and they think that the movie is really good, so they don't want this to put it in the least, I don't know, I can't even think of the word. They don't want the blemish of Kevin Spacey on the movie. Put it that way. It's not the word I wanted to use, but that's the word I'm going with. So this is a big, surprising, bold move, an ambitious move on everyone's part, because Sony now has to rework all the promotional material, which is pretty damn hard, because that means they gotta pull everything that they had already paid for to wait and shoot all of Christopher Plummer's scenes. Apparently, the reshoots are going to take place in the next few weeks, and they're gonna just work overtime. This is incredible. This is I think I read one report. I think it was from Collider, because I was reading multiple reports on what was going on with this. It's never really been done before. So this is really, I mean, people get, reshot all the time, but not on a completed movie that is set to be released in a month. This is crazy that this happened. Now this just piles on the movie, because the allegations against Spacey had the film removed from the AFI film festival, and it was going to close the film festival, which is a really big deal if you close the AFI film festival. Also, Sony Pictures was really looking to get Kevin Spacey a Best Supporting Actor nomination for the Oscars for his turn as the character. And they put him under really heavy makeup and everything to make him look like J. Paul Getty, but it just, all of it's for nothing now. This is really crazy. I've never read a report. I've never read anything like this before. I've read people getting recasted and they had to go back and reshoot the scenes. Yeah, sure, that's fine. The kicker here is that they have a month to do this, a little bit more than a month to do this. But when you think about it, it's crazy that they would do that, because now they have to go back, redo all the scenes. They have to get everyone that was involved in those scenes with him back, and it is mind-boggling that this happened. When I read that, I was very surprised. There was talks about delaying all the money in the world, for removing it from the release schedule and releasing it sometime next year, but Sony went against that. They're like, again, we think this movie is great. We think the performances are amazing, and that people should go watch this movie. But yes, it was going to be very hard to see Kevin Spacey on the big screen. Now, this is I can't believe, my head spun when I read this, because it's just amazing that Sony and Ridley Scott and the producers of this movie would just be so for it, that they would go for it and they'd be like, you know what? No, we can totally do it. We can reshoot all his scenes. We can cut all his scenes out from the final product and put them in there. It's amazing. It's amazing in the sense that they can, if they can pull this off, wow. But it's even more amazing that they literally removed Kevin Spacey from a movie. Man, I've never read anything like this before. I don't think anyone has ever read anything like this before. People get recasted all the time. Yeah, sure, fine. That is not the biggest story here. Biggest story, I think for me the biggest story here is that they're still intent on releasing the movie at the end of next month. That for me is the bigger story. It's just wow. All right, so let's move on to the final news item of the week, which broke at the last minute yesterday. Rian Johnson is developing a new Star Wars trilogy, and he will direct and write the first installment. So during a conference call with investors, Disney CEO Bob Iger revealed that Star Wars The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson is developing a new Star Wars trilogy. In a statement released by Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, who is, again, the head of Lucasfilm, for those of you guys who don't know, said this, saying, quote, "We all loved working with Rian on The Last Jedi. He's a creative force, and watching him craft The Last Jedi from start to finish was one of the great joys of my career. Rian will do amazing things with a blank canvas of his new trilogy." End quote. Now, of course, details on the new trilogy are scarce, but StarWars.com, which actually released the Lucasfilm statement, reports that Johnson will work with his longtime collaborator, Ram Bergman. Yes, his name is Ram, which I found very cool. But anyway, he will write and direct the first film, and will introduce, quote, "new characters from a corner of the galaxy that Star Wars lore has never before been explored." So that's kind of cool. So the new trilogy will not follow the episodic Skywalker saga that we all know. So this is brand new characters, brand new, like you said, lore, and a new corner of the galaxy. This is a huge, huge thing, and it is a huge sign of not only confidence in The Last Jedi, but also in Rian Johnson. You don't hand out jobs like that. It's like, oh, you're gonna start this new franchise for us under the biggest possible umbrella that you can, and biggest brand that is out there, that is well known in Lucasfilm and Star Wars. You don't hand out jobs like that. So, and I'm sure this puts immense pressure on Johnson, and this puts tremendous pressure. I think I was trying to say tremendous, and for some reason I said immense. Anyway, I'm going to leave it in. I don't care. Tremendous pressure on Johnson, but also tremendous pressure on The Last Jedi, because The Last Jedi is getting a lot of hype already. So all aboard the hype train, even more, put a few more carts in there so more people can come on board, because this is huge news. And also, considering all the behind-the-scenes drama and shifts that we've been getting from the previous Star Wars movies like Rogue One and Solo, it's kind of nice to hear something good come out of the Lucasfilm and Star Wars camp, because we haven't heard anything negative or anything like trouble-wise with The Last Jedi. Rian Johnson has apparently kept his ship on the straight and narrow, and it's just been smooth sailing for him. So again, this is really huge, and I am tremendously excited for Johnson for his new gig. And again, you don't get a gig like that. You don't get something that huge to start a new trilogy in this Star Wars saga and franchise because they're like, you did a good job, go ahead. No, they believe in Rian Johnson. They believe that he can do this, and he can start a new trilogy and a new franchise for people to come in and go watch. I mean, yes, regardless, you put Star Wars up on a big screen, people are going to go watch it, but you don't hand something off like this to someone without having a lot of faith in them. So this is really, really big for Rian Johnson. This is really huge for all us nerds and everyone else who loves Star Wars. So we'll get to see what Rian Johnson brings to the table and his new job, because we don't have to wait too long, because Star Wars The Last Jedi opens on December 15th. So almost 2 months from now. So we're in for a huge surprise and huge news coming out of the Star Wars camp. So this is awesome. This is so cool. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. That's all the movie news at the time of this recording. So thank you guys so much for listening to the movie. Podcast is not over. I'm just saying the movie news is over. So yeah, that's it. That is all the movie news. If you want to go keep up with all the movie news items, all the big noteworthy news items, you can go like my Facebook page down below at the facebook.com/moviepit. There's a link down there in the description/show notes area. You guys can go click it. Give me a like. You'll get an early preview of what we're talking about on the podcast. However, there are movie news items that we don't talk about on the podcast, so if you want to go check those out, you can. That's the advantage of liking the Facebook page. You get to see what we're talking about. Also down there are links to my WordPress account where I do my written reviews. They are all spoiler-free written reviews, so you don't have to worry about being spoiled in the movie. They're all up there. I will have, I think I will have a written review up this weekend. I'm not positive, but they'll be up there as well. Also down there are my handles for my social media accounts. My personal handles for my personal Twitters and my Twitters. Why did I say Twitters? For my Instagram and my Twitter. My Twitter handle for the podcast is up there as well. I always say this every week that I will be using the Twitter page a lot more. I have not been doing that, although I had an excuse this week because I was out of town. But I will be hopefully using the Twitter page more as time goes on. So be gentle on me. I have I run a Facebook page for crying out loud. Come on. So yeah, there all that's down there, and I got some other stuff down there as well for you guys if you want to go check that out down below as well. All right, so let's move on to this week's releases, shall we? Let's do it, please. For the love of God, let's do it. So we have one real noteworthy limited release this week, and that is the 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, written and directed by Martin McDowell, who directed and wrote films like In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths, which are very good if you haven't watched it. Especially Seven Bruges. I'm going to put two movies together. Especially In Bruges. If you haven't watched In Bruges, I highly recommend you go watch that. A mother personally challenges the local authorities to solve her daughter's murder when they fail to catch the culprit. The cast includes Frances McDormand, Sam Rockwell, Woody Harrelson, Abby Cornish, Lucas Hedges, Peter Dinklage, and John Hawkes. This looks great. This looks absolutely fantastic. Again, I'm a huge fan of Martin McDowell and what he's done in Bruges and Seven Psychopaths. And I can't wait for this. Everyone's been saying some good things about this. It looks pretty great. Frances McDormand looks like she's a powerhouse in this movie, so I can't. And Sam Rockwell, of course, always fantastic. Woody Harrelson, always fantastic. Peter Dinklage, always fantastic as well. And John Hawkes, of course, always fantastic. So you got all fantastic all around for this cast in this movie. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's your limited release of the week. Your wide releases this week, we have two of them. The first one is Daddy's Home 2. Brad and Dusty must deal with their intrusive fathers during the holidays. The movie stars Will Ferrell, Mark Wahlberg, John Lithgow, Mel Gibson, Linda Cardellini, and John C. This looks pretty good. I've mentioned many times now, since we talked about Daddy's Home 2 on the podcast, that I didn't watch Daddy's Home, the first one, until earlier this year, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this one looks pretty funny. It looks kind of like the first one a little bit. I like the chemistry between Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, so I'm really looking forward to it. So let's hopefully it's funny and good. That's all I can say. So the final wide release this week, the only other wide release this week, is Murder on the Orient Express. Based off the novel by Agatha Christie and directed by Kenneth Branagh, a lavish train ride unfolds into a stylized and suspenseful mystery as 13 strangers and one man's race to solve the puzzle before the murderer strikes again. The film stars Branagh, he's actually one of the leads in the movie, as well as Daisy Ridley, Josh Gad, Penelope Cruz, Michelle Pfeiffer, William Dafoe, Olivia Colman, Leslie Odom Jr., and Judi Dench, of course, amongst many others. This looks not too bad. I actually have never read the Agatha Christie novel. I did have every intention to read the novel before I saw the movie, and then just everything kind of just piled on me, and I couldn't read it in time. So I do still intend on reading the novel, because you never know, they might change some stuff. And there have been other adaptations of Murder on the Orient Express before as well. I don't know, this one, I haven't really seen the reviews for this one yet. I know there's been reviews out, but I just haven't seen them. It looks okay. It doesn't look too bad. Hopefully I'll be able to get over Kenneth Branagh's crazy mustache in the movie. But yeah, hopefully that is the case. Hopefully it turns out good. So hopefully it's at least good. It's at least a good suspenseful thriller. And hopefully we'll see. We'll just see. So that's it. That's all your releases for the week. Your wide releases are Murder on the Orient Express and Daddy's Home 2, with your limited release of the week being 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate it. Even though I don't show my appreciation too much on my new Twitter account, I do very much appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Hopefully you guys have a good, safe weekend. It's starting to get cold around these parts. It's gonna be it's cold today. It's oh my god, it's so cold. But I mean I'm not complaining. I mean I'm from outside Chicago, so I know how cold it gets here. I'm not gonna complain how cold it gets. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Let me know what you guys thought of the podcast this week. If you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment down below or send me a message. If you're listening on SoundCloud, send me a message. Show me that like. If you're listening this on iTunes, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, then thank you so much. And for those of you who are not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Also, if you're be so kind and leave a review and rating on there, I would also very much appreciate that. It will help me up in the long run over on iTunes, and just shows me that you guys care and that you guys listen. Even if it's a comment and rating telling me that I suck, you know what? You took time out of your day to tell me that I suck. I'd really much appreciate that. So thank you. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast this week. Hopefully you guys have a safe and fun weekend. And I will catch you guys here next week, where we will talk about more of the movie news. We will talk about more trailers. And of course, we will talk about the movies coming out next weekend. One of them, of course, being Justice League. We can only hope, guys. We can only hope it's so good. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Have a safe one. And as always, as we always close out the podcast here, go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!